The rancher saw a runaway Apache woman bathing in the stream behind his house. Her beauty was exceptional. His life on the remote plains was simple, filled with long days tending to cattle, mending fences, and walking the dusty trails that crisscrossed his land. He liked it that way. The wind, the sky, and the endless stretch of fields were all the company he needed. There was a rhythm to his days, a predictability that gave him peace. But that afternoon, as he walked along the edge of the forest behind his house, everything changed in an instant. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden streaks through the trees. The birds had fallen silent, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and the faint gurgle of the stream that wound behind his house. He was used to hearing every sound in these woods, the snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of a hawk. But today, a new sound caught his attention. It was soft, like water breaking gently against a stone, but it was accompanied by something else, a splash, a movement that was not quite like any animal he had seen. Curiosity stirred in him. He moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. The stream was a small one, its waters clear and shallow, winding its way through the grass and rocks. He had often come here to wash his hands after a long day or to watch the trout dart beneath the surface, but today, the stream held a different presence. As he stepped closer, his eyes widened in surprise and something akin to disbelief. A young woman was in the water. She had apparently not noticed him at all, absorbed in her own world. She moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural for the rugged landscape she was in. Her hair, dark and wet, clung to her shoulders and back, catching the sunlight in streaks of chestnut and black. Her skin, tanned and smooth, glimmered under the sun. She dipped her hands into the water, letting it run through her fingers, and tilted her head back, her eyes closed, as if she were drawing the warmth of the sun into herself. The rancher froze. For a moment, he wondered if he should retreat, if he should pretend he had seen nothing and leave her to her privacy. But something about the scene held him in place. It was not just her beauty, it was the air around her, the quiet confidence, and the sense that she belonged to the wilderness as much as the trees, the wind, and the water. He lowered himself behind a bush, his breath shallow. He could feel his heart beating faster than usual, though it was not fear that had him in its grip. He was careful to move quietly, careful not to let her know he was watching. He reminded himself that this woman could be in trouble. She might be running from something, from someone, or from circumstances he could not imagine. He had heard stories of people escaping danger, stories of the Apache people who had faced hardships and prejudice in the lands around him. Could she be one of them? The woman stretched, rising from the water, letting droplets fall from her hair like tiny jewels. She reached for a piece of cloth she had brought with her, wrapping it around herself with careful movements. Her eyes scanned the forest edges as if she were listening for sounds he could not hear. The rancher noticed the tension in her shoulders, the slight quickening of her movements. This was not a woman who lived without caution. She was alert, aware, and ready for whatever might come her way. He wanted to speak, to call out, to make sure she was safe, but he stayed hidden. He thought of how surprising it would be to step forward and suddenly reveal himself to someone so obviously cautious. What would she think? Would she run or would she defend herself? He had no intention of frightening her, yet the urge to reach out to show kindness pressed heavily on him. As he watched, she crouched by the edge of the stream, cupping water in her hands and bringing it to her face. He noticed the careful movements of her hands, the way she seemed almost ritualistic in her bathing. This was no ordinary bath. It was a moment of peace, a private act of care for herself in the midst of an uncertain life. And then, suddenly, she looked up. Her gaze swept across the forest, and for an instant it seemed to meet his hidden eyes. He ducked instinctively behind the bush, hoping she had not noticed him. The wind shifted slightly, rustling the leaves in a louder whisper than before, and for a moment he feared she would vanish into the trees without him ever knowing more about her. But she did not leave. She stood tall, adjusting the cloth around her, and continued to wash herself with a quiet determination that seemed to fill the space around her. The rancher's mind raced. Who was she? Why was she here? And why did he feel so strongly that he needed to help her? He knew nothing of her story, nothing of the trials she might be facing. Yet, instinctively, he felt a connection, a responsibility to ensure that she remained unharmed. He thought of the days when he had seen animals injured or lost, and how he could not turn away from them. Perhaps this woman, too, deserved the same care, the same protection. Hours seemed to pass without the sound of another human being. The rancher stayed in place, hidden by the undergrowth, marveling at the quiet beauty of the scene before him. The woman moved with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the sharpness of the world outside the forest. He noticed the muscles in her arms and shoulders, strong yet elegant, the result of a life spent in the open air, surviving the elements, moving through the land with agility and skill. She was clearly not a stranger to hardship, and yet she carried herself with dignity. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows over the stream. The rancher knew he had to decide whether to leave or reveal himself. He considered the consequences, the possible reactions, and the unspoken dangers of stepping into her world uninvited. But the thought of leaving her alone, vulnerable, filled him with unease. He wanted to ensure she was safe. He wanted to offer her something she might need, a kind word, a helping hand, even if she refused it. He finally moved a little closer, keeping low and careful. The sound of his boots on dry leaves was almost inaudible, but he knew the approach could be risky. The woman did not notice him at first, still engaged in her own movements. And then, as she stood to leave, adjusting her cloth around her, their eyes met, not in fear but in a quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence. For a brief moment, everything felt suspended. There was no rush, no threat, only the shared understanding that two lives had crossed paths in an unexpected way. The rancher felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. He wanted to speak but chose silence, realizing that any sudden movement or sound might scare her away. He admired her courage, the way she seemed so at ease in the water, yet aware of the world around her. The woman turned and walked toward the forest, her steps light yet purposeful. The rancher followed at a distance, careful to remain unseen. He noticed the faint marks on her skin, hints of past struggles, though he could not know the story behind them. Every movement she made, from the tilt of her head to the swing of her arms, conveyed both strength and vulnerability. As she disappeared into the trees, the rancher lingered by the stream, feeling the quiet weight of the encounter. He realized that this moment would stay with him, that the image of her, so alive and free in the wilderness, would be imprinted on his mind. He also felt a stirring of something new, an awareness that life could change in an instant, that the ordinary rhythm of his days could be interrupted by events beyond his imagination. He returned to his cabin as the sun began to set, the sky painted with shades of pink and orange. His thoughts remained with the woman, wondering who she was, what circumstances had brought her to this stream, and whether he would see her again. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint sound of water over rocks, a gentle reminder of the encounter he could neither forget nor fully understand. That night he lay awake, thinking of her movements in the water, the shine of her hair, the quiet confidence that had seemed to fill the space around her. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the story of the woman at the stream was far from over, and that somehow their lives had become connected in ways he could not yet comprehend. The morning after the rancher had first seen the woman at the stream, he woke early, as he always did. The sun was barely rising over the horizon, painting the plains with soft shades of gold and orange. Birds began to sing again, filling the air with a gentle chorus, and the wind carried the familiar scent of earth, grass, and livestock. Normally, he would have started his chores immediately, feeding the animals, checking the fences, preparing for the day ahead. But today, his mind was elsewhere. All night he had thought about the woman. He wondered who she was, where she had come from, and what had brought her to this secluded place. He thought of the way she had moved in the stream, so graceful and calm, yet alert, as if she knew dangers lurked even in the quietest moments. He could not shake the image of her, and he knew, deep down, that he would not leave the story here. He needed to see her again to understand her and to ensure she was safe. After finishing some early chores, he decided to walk along the path to the stream. He moved cautiously, hoping that today he might have another glimpse of her. He did not intend to startle her. He only wanted to know she was all right. As he approached the bend in the stream, the familiar sound of moving water reached his ears. But this time there was something else, a soft rustling of leaves, the faint crack of a twig. He stopped and peered through the undergrowth. There she was, crouched by the water just as the day before. She had apparently not noticed him yet, absorbed in gathering water and examining her reflection in the clear stream. Her hair hung in wet strands over her shoulders, and her hands moved with precision, scooping the water carefully. The rancher's heart quickened, not with fear but with the intense awareness of her presence. This time she turned her head slightly and their eyes met almost immediately. She froze, her gaze sharp and wary. In that instant the rancher realized just how cautious she was. He had thought before that she moved with natural confidence, but now he understood it was more than that. She was protecting herself. She had clearly been forced to rely on her instincts, to be ready for any danger at any moment. He raised his hand slowly, showing that he meant no harm. His voice was calm and soft when he spoke, careful not to startle her. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just want to make sure you're all right." She did not speak at first, only studied him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Her hand tightened around a small knife she had at her side, and the rancher could see the tension in her shoulders. She was prepared to defend herself if necessary. But there was something in his tone, something gentle and honest, that seemed to reach her. Slowly she relaxed, though only slightly, still holding her knife loosely in one hand. He took a small step closer, careful not to invade her space. "I live nearby," he said. "My house is just over the hill. If you need food, water, or a place to rest, I can help." The woman's eyes narrowed and she studied him carefully. She said nothing at first, only tilted her head as if considering his words. The rancher waited patiently, understanding that trust could not be rushed. He thought of the hardships she must have endured to make her cautious in this way, and he respected her silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. The rancher smiled faintly, understanding the question. "You don't have to trust me yet," he said. "I only ask that you let me help if you need it. You can decide for yourself whether to trust me later." For a long moment she said nothing. The wind rustled the trees above them, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh water. The sun reflected off the stream, glinting like tiny sparks across the surface. The rancher watched her carefully, noticing the small details, the way she flexed her fingers as she held the knife, the slight movement of her shoulders, the alertness in her eyes. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was strength, resilience, and intelligence in every movement. At last she took a step back from the water and lowered her knife. "I'm hungry," she admitted quietly. The rancher nodded, feeling a small surge of relief. "I can bring you something to eat," he said. "Come with me, or I can leave it here for you if you prefer." She hesitated, clearly torn between caution and necessity. He waited, keeping his distance, giving her space to decide. Finally, she nodded slightly, agreeing without words. He motioned for her to follow, and together they walked a short distance to a clearing where he had left some bread and dried meat from his own stores. She took the food with quiet gratitude, still watching him closely as she ate. The rancher sat a few steps away, careful not to crowd her, but keeping an eye on her, ready to react if needed. He noticed how quickly she ate, yet with controlled movements, as if she had learned to conserve energy and eat carefully during her travels. He realized that this woman's life had been far from easy, and yet she had survived, adapting to challenges with skill and intelligence. As they finished eating, he spoke gently. "My name is Thomas," he said. "I live here alone. I know the land well. If you ever need a safe place, my door is open. You don't have to stay if you don't want, but you should know you're welcome." The woman looked at him, her eyes searching for any sign of deception. After a moment, she spoke softly, almost as if admitting a truth she had kept hidden for a long time. "I am called Aeon," she said. Thomas nodded. "It's good to meet you, Aeon," he said. "I won't ask you about your past unless you want to tell me. I just want to make sure you're safe for now." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the sounds of the stream and the wind through the trees. The rancher watched her carefully, noting how she seemed to relax slightly, though still wary. He understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned step by step. Over the next few hours, they talked in small bursts, mostly about practical things: the weather, the land, the animals he kept. Aeon listened quietly, asking a few questions but revealing little about herself. Thomas understood. She had learned early in life to protect her story, to keep her past close and only share when it was safe. He respected that, knowing that rushing her would only push her away. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Thomas offered to leave her with more food and water for the day. Aeon accepted, her eyes showing a flicker of trust, though guarded. She moved with quiet grace as she returned to the forest edge, carrying her supplies. Thomas watched her disappear among the trees, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. He knew this encounter was only the beginning, that their paths would cross again. Over the next several days, Thomas made it a habit to check the stream. Each time, Aeon was there, sometimes at the same spot, sometimes hidden among the trees. Their interactions grew gradually: small gestures, quiet conversations, shared meals left near the water. She began to relax in his presence, though always alert, always aware. Thomas admired her patience, her intelligence, and her resilience. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm forced Aeon to seek shelter. She appeared at Thomas's cabin, soaked and shivering, unsure if he would welcome her indoors. Thomas quickly offered her dry clothes and a warm place by the fire. She hesitated, glancing around, but finally accepted, grateful for his kindness. For the first time, she entered the space he called home, a step that marked a significant shift in trust between them. That evening, as the storm raged outside, they sat quietly by the fire. Thomas offered her hot tea, and she accepted, holding the cup carefully, warming her hands against it. They spoke in small, careful sentences, learning about each other in fragments: her curiosity about the land, his respect for her strength, the quiet understanding that had formed between them. Thomas noticed how she moved with cautious confidence, how she observed every detail of the cabin and the surrounding land. He realized that Aeon was not just a survivor. She was intelligent, capable, and aware in ways that were remarkable. Her beauty, which had first caught his attention, was only part of what made her extraordinary. Her spirit, her courage, and her sharp mind shone even brighter. As the storm subsided and night fell, Aeon curled up near the fire, finally allowing herself a moment of rest. Thomas watched her for a while, feeling a mixture of admiration and protectiveness. He understood that she had been through much, that the world could be harsh and unforgiving, and that she had learned to rely on herself above all else. Yet in that quiet moment, he realized that she was beginning to trust him, and that trust was a fragile, precious thing. By the time she left the next morning, the bond between them had grown stronger, though unspoken. Thomas had learned that patience, respect, and quiet support were more powerful than force or persuasion. Aeon had learned that there was someone she could rely on, at least in the immediate sense, someone who did not demand her story but offered safety and kindness. Their encounters continued in this way, each day building upon the last. Thomas left food, water, and sometimes small gifts near the stream. Aeon accepted them with quiet gratitude, slowly letting her guard down. They began to communicate more freely, though still cautiously. Thomas learned fragments of her past, understanding the hardships she had endured and the strength she carried within her. With each day, the tension that had filled their first meeting faded, replaced by a growing sense of connection. Thomas found himself thinking of her constantly, wondering how she fared when he was not near. Aeon, too, began to consider him in her thoughts, recognizing a rare kindness in a world that had often been cruel. By the end of this part of their story, the initial fear and uncertainty had shifted. Trust was growing, slowly and carefully, like new shoots pushing through soil after a harsh winter. Both understood that the path ahead would require patience, respect, and courage. And both sensed, though neither admitted it yet, that their lives were becoming intertwined in ways that would change them forever. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of life on the ranch began to shift ever so slightly. The rancher, Thomas, had grown accustomed to the thought of Aeon returning to the stream each day. He found himself looking forward to catching a glimpse of her, hoping that she would appear safely, yet he never rushed or pressured her. He had learned that trust, once broken or forced, was impossible to restore, and he had no intention of pushing her. Aeon, on her part, had begun to notice the care Thomas put into his land and his animals. She watched him work, observing the way he moved among the cattle with gentle authority, guiding them without force, understanding each one's needs. She began to see that he was not only capable but thoughtful, a man who respected life in all its forms. This respect, though subtle, impressed her deeply. It was rare to meet someone who lived with such quiet awareness. One morning, Aeon appeared at the stream earlier than usual. The sun was just rising, and the dew still clung to the grass like tiny jewels. Thomas was already outside, repairing a fence near the edge of the woods. As he saw her, he waved gently, careful not to startle her. She responded with a small nod, her eyes softening slightly, though the ever-present wariness remained. He walked toward her slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Good morning, Aeon," he said quietly. "I've left some bread and dried meat near the big rock by the stream. I hope it will be enough for the day." She approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the area as she did every day. She picked up the food he had left, examining it briefly before tucking it into her satchel. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that had not been there before. Thomas noticed the subtle change. It was not dramatic, but it was significant. It was a sign that she was beginning to trust him, even in the smallest ways. He understood that trust was built in moments like these, quiet, patient, almost imperceptible gestures that spoke louder than words. Over the next several days, Thomas continued his routine of leaving food and water near the stream. Aeon accepted these offerings more readily, sometimes even speaking to him for a few moments before retreating into the trees. They began to exchange small stories about the land, the animals, and the changing seasons. She asked questions about the crops he grew, the cattle he tended, and the routines he followed. In return, he asked about her knowledge of the forest, the herbs and plants she recognized, and the ways she moved through the land with such confidence. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds gathered quickly and the wind picked up, bending the tall grass and sending a chill through the air. Thomas watched from his cabin as rain began to fall, first in drops, then in steady sheets. He knew the forest paths could become treacherous in such weather. And then through the curtain of rain he saw Aeon running, her movements swift but careful, as if she had practiced escaping danger many times before. Without hesitation, Thomas ran to meet her, calling out. "Aeon, come to the cabin. You'll get soaked out there." She hesitated, glancing at him, but the rain was already soaking her clothes, and the wind made it difficult to move quickly. With a small nod, she followed him to the safety of the cabin. Once inside, Thomas quickly set about helping her dry off. He handed her dry clothes he had kept ready and stoked the fire to warmth. She accepted everything quietly, her eyes scanning the cabin for any threats, though none existed. Sitting by the fire, Aeon began to speak for the first time about her journey. "I've been traveling alone for a long time," she admitted softly. "I've had to hide from people who wouldn't leave me in peace. I've learned to rely only on myself." Thomas listened intently, nodding. He did not press her for details, understanding that some stories were too painful or private to share quickly. Instead, he offered gentle acknowledgement. "You've been through a lot," he said. "It takes courage to survive on your own like that. I admire your strength." She looked at him, a faint surprise in her expression. Most people she had met in her travels had reacted with pity, fear, or suspicion. Thomas reacted with respect, and this subtle difference mattered deeply to her. For the first time, she felt that she could breathe a little, that she did not have to carry all her burdens alone, at least for now. The storm passed, leaving the air crisp and fresh. Aeon sat quietly by the fire for some time, her thoughts clearly heavy but her posture more relaxed than it had been in weeks. Thomas respected her silence, understanding that healing, like trust, could not be rushed. Instead, he focused on small acts of kindness, bringing her food, offering warm water, and sharing the quiet comfort of the cabin. In the days that followed, Aeon began to linger longer at the stream. She no longer disappeared immediately after receiving food or water. Sometimes she would sit and watch Thomas work, observing him quietly as he tended the land. They began to exchange more words, their conversations simple but meaningful. She told him about the plants she recognized, the ways she had learned to navigate the forest, and small stories from her past that were safe to share. Thomas, in turn, told her about his life on the ranch, his childhood, and the routines he followed. He shared lessons he had learned from working the land, how to tend animals, how to recognize weather patterns, and how to survive in harsh conditions. These exchanges, though simple, formed a bridge between them, connecting their lives in ways that words alone could not. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Thomas offered to show Aeon the barn and the animals. She hesitated at first, but curiosity won over caution. He led her carefully, ensuring that the path was safe. Inside the barn, she marveled at the animals, cattle, chickens, and a few goats. She asked questions about their care, and Thomas answered patiently, explaining each task with care. Aeon's eyes sparkled with quiet enthusiasm as she touched the animals gently, observing their reactions. Thomas noticed her ease and grace, the way she seemed to understand the rhythms of the animals almost instinctively. He realized that her survival skills in the forest had translated beautifully to caring for life on the ranch. He felt a deep respect growing for her intelligence and adaptability. As the days passed, a subtle bond began to form. Aeon started to trust Thomas more, though still cautiously. She shared fragments of her life, memories of her family, and the lessons she had learned from hardship. Thomas listened without judgment, offering kindness and understanding. He realized that her beauty was not only in her appearance but in her courage, her resilience, and her ability to navigate the world with awareness and skill. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day of chores, Aeon spoke softly about her fears. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that one day someone will come looking for me and I won't be able to hide. Afraid that I'll be alone again." Thomas nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You're not alone now," he said gently. "I'll help you as much as I can. You don't have to face this alone anymore." Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no suspicion in her gaze. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition that he meant what he said. She allowed herself to relax, even just a little, trusting that he would not betray that fragile trust. In the weeks that followed, Aeon's presence became a part of Thomas's daily life. She would sometimes join him in small tasks around the ranch, helping with chores, observing his routines, and even offering her own knowledge of the land. Their relationship remained respectful, cautious, and grounded in mutual trust. Each interaction, each shared task, built a foundation for a deeper connection. Thomas began to see Aeon not just as a woman who needed help, but as someone remarkable in her own right. She was strong, intelligent, and capable, and her courage inspired him. He admired her deeply, not only for her beauty, but for the way she carried herself, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. Aeon, in turn, began to see Thomas differently. She saw a man who was reliable, kind, and trustworthy, a rare combination in a world that had often been cruel to her. She realized that she could rely on him for safety, guidance, and support. Slowly, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she did not have to run, where she could rest without fear, and where trust could exist without strings attached. By the end of this part, the slow building of trust had created a quiet bond between them. It was not yet friendship in the full sense, but it was something strong and meaningful, a connection based on respect, patience, and mutual understanding. Both knew that challenges would come, that the world outside the ranch was unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. Yet in the quiet safety of the ranch and by the gentle flow of the stream, they had begun to form a relationship that would carry them through the trials ahead. And so, as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land, Thomas and Aeon sat in the cabin by the fire, each lost in thought. They were no longer strangers. They were two people connected by circumstance, trust, and the fragile hope of safety and companionship. The days ahead would test their bond, but for now, they had found a moment of peace, a small sanctuary where trust could grow, and where two lives once separate were slowly beginning to intertwine. The days of calm and quiet on the ranch were not meant to last forever. Thomas had grown used to the rhythm of life with Aeon nearby, the subtle exchange of trust, and the gentle understanding that had developed between them. He had come to value her presence more than he had ever expected, and he sensed that she, too, had begun to see the ranch as a place of safety, a rare gift in a world that had not been kind to her. But the peace of their shared routine was fragile. One late afternoon, as Thomas was repairing a section of fence near the edge of the property, he noticed something unusual. A group of men had appeared in the distance, moving cautiously through the trees. They were clearly searching for something or someone. His stomach tightened. His mind raced through the possibilities, and in an instant he realized who they were looking for: Aeon. He moved quickly but quietly, making his way back to the cabin. Inside, Aeon was sitting near the fire, working with a small bundle of herbs she had collected from the forest. She looked up as he entered, sensing the change in his demeanor. "What is it?" she asked, her voice calm but alert. Thomas took a deep breath and chose his words carefully. "There are people searching the forest. I think they are looking for you." Aeon's eyes widened slightly, but she did not panic. She had faced danger before, but the presence of others so close to her, combined with the unexpected protection offered by Thomas, created a new tension in the air. "What do we do?" she asked softly. Thomas considered the situation. The men could not be allowed to find her. If they did, her safety and possibly her freedom would be in jeopardy. He realized that hiding her in the cabin would not be enough. They needed a plan, one that would keep her safe while avoiding direct confrontation. He spoke calmly but firmly. "We will have to be careful. I can help you stay hidden. The barn loft is safe for now, and I can create distractions to keep them away. But we must remain quiet and vigilant until they leave." Aeon nodded. She trusted him, though caution still lingered in her eyes. Together, they moved quickly but quietly to the barn, where she could hide out of sight. Thomas brought her a blanket and some food, ensuring that she would be comfortable and prepared to stay hidden for an extended period if necessary. As night fell, Thomas took his place outside, keeping watch over the property. He used his knowledge of the land to create small diversions, moving quietly through the trees, making subtle sounds, and ensuring that the men would think the area was empty or that she had moved on. The tension in the air was thick, each rustle of leaves or snap of a twig setting Thomas on edge. Yet he remained focused, determined to keep Aeon safe. Meanwhile, in the barn loft, Aeon listened to the sounds of the night, her heart beating steadily but with awareness. She could sense Thomas's presence nearby, feel his determination to protect her. For the first time in a long while, she realized that someone cared for her safety, not for gain or obligation, but out of genuine concern. This realization brought a quiet comfort, even as danger lurked close by. The men spent hours searching the forest, their footsteps and voices echoing faintly through the trees. Thomas remained calm, carefully guiding them away from the barn and the cabin. He was careful not to draw attention to himself, but he could see their frustration growing. They were determined, but Thomas knew the land better than they did. He used every bit of his knowledge, every shortcut and hidden path to protect Aeon. As the night deepened, Aeon began to feel a strange mixture of fear and trust. She had faced danger before, but never had someone put themselves at risk to protect her without asking for anything in return. The firelight in the barn cast soft shadows, and she could hear the faint sounds of Thomas moving through the forest, guiding and deceiving the searchers. She realized that she was not alone in her fight for safety, and this thought brought a quiet strength. Hours later, as dawn approached, the men finally began to leave, frustrated and unable to find the person they sought. Thomas returned to the barn, exhausted but relieved. Aeon looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "You saved me," she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of everything she had endured. Thomas shook his head, trying to downplay the danger. "We kept you safe together," he said. "That's all that matters." The storm of the previous night and the tension of the searchers had created a new bond between them. They had faced fear together, and the experience had deepened the trust and understanding that had been slowly growing over the weeks. Aeon realized that Thomas was not only someone who offered safety, but someone who could be relied upon in moments of extreme danger. Over the next few days, life on the ranch slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Aeon began to emerge from the barn more frequently, still cautious but more confident in her surroundings. Thomas continued his routines, but now there was a heightened sense of awareness. Every sound, every movement in the forest was watched carefully, yet the tension no longer felt overwhelming. They had faced danger and survived, and in doing so, they had strengthened the connection between them. One afternoon, as they walked together along a familiar path near the stream, Thomas spoke quietly. "You handled yourself well during the search," he said. "I've seen many people face danger, but your calmness and awareness impressed me." Aeon looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "I've had to survive on my own for a long time," she said. "I've learned to stay alert and think quickly, but you taught me that I can trust someone to help me. That is new for me." Thomas felt a warmth in his chest at her words. It was not pride, but a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she was beginning to feel safe, that she could rely on him without fear. He realized that their bond was more than just the result of circumstance. It was built on respect, trust, and shared experience. As the days passed, Thomas and Aeon continued to strengthen their connection. They worked together on small tasks around the ranch, shared meals, and spent time talking quietly by the stream. Each day, Aeon grew more comfortable in his presence, and Thomas grew more aware of the remarkable qualities she possessed. She was intelligent, resourceful, and brave, But she was also kind and thoughtful, traits that Thomas admired deeply. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Thomas and Aeon sat by the stream, watching the water flow gently over the rocks. The air was calm, filled with the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves. For a moment, the events of the past days seemed distant, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. "You know," Thomas said softly, "I never thought I'd meet someone like you out here. Someone who is not only strong but also remarkable in every way." Aeon looked at him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I never thought I'd meet someone who would care for me without asking for anything in return," she replied. You are different from anyone I've known." The quiet honesty between them created a new understanding, a recognition that went beyond words. They had faced danger together, built trust, and shared moments of vulnerability. The experiences they had endured had created a bond that was not easily broken, one that could withstand the challenges yet to come. Over the next few weeks, Thomas and Aeon continued to live with this new awareness. They remained cautious, knowing that the world outside the ranch could be unpredictable, but they also allowed themselves moments of simple joy, walking through the fields, tending the animals, and sharing quiet conversations by the fire. Each interaction strengthened their bond, creating a foundation of trust and respect that would carry them through the future. One day, as they worked together in the barn, Aeon paused and looked at Thomas. "I feel safer here," she said. "Not just because you protect me, but because I can be myself. I don't have to hide all the time." Thomas nodded, understanding the significance of her words. "You're welcome here," he said gently, "and I hope you know that this is more than just a place to hide. It's a place to live, to rest, and to be yourself." Aeon's eyes softened, and for a moment the weight of her past seemed to lift slightly. She realized that she had found something rare, a place where she could feel safe, a person she could trust, and the beginnings of a life that was not dictated by fear. By the end of this part, Thomas and Aeon had faced danger together and emerged stronger. Their bond had grown through shared experience, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that trust is built slowly, but when it exists, it creates a foundation for something lasting. The challenges they had endured had revealed the depth of their characters and the strength of their connection. And as they watched the sun set behind the hills, the stream flowing gently at their feet, both Thomas and Aeon knew that the days ahead would bring more challenges, but they also knew that they would face them together. In the quiet safety of the ranch and the trust they had built, they had found something rare and precious, the beginning of a partnership forged in courage, understanding, and hope. The days after the searchers had left were quiet, almost painfully peaceful, but Thomas and Aeon had learned to cherish every calm moment. The tension that had gripped them both began to ease, replaced by a sense of safety and trust. Aeon moved more freely now around the ranch, tending to small chores alongside Thomas. She still kept her guard in subtle ways, pausing at the edges of the forest, listening for distant sounds, but she no longer flinched at every shadow. Thomas noticed the change with quiet satisfaction. He had seen her grow more confident with each passing day, and it filled him with a sense of pride and admiration. He also realized that his feelings for her had deepened beyond the protective instinct that had first guided him. Her courage, intelligence, and quiet strength had become as important to him as the land itself. One morning, Thomas approached Aeon as she stood by the stream, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. He carried a small basket of supplies, bread, dried meat, and fresh water, prepared as he did each day. "I've left this for you," he said softly, placing the basket at her feet. "I hope it will last for the day." Aeon looked at him and smiled, a gentle expression that made his chest tighten with warmth. "Thank you," she said. "It will be enough." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the stream and the distant calls of birds. The quiet was comfortable, not empty, filled instead with a mutual understanding. Neither needed to speak to feel the bond that had formed between them. As the day passed, they worked together on small projects around the ranch. Thomas showed Aeon how to mend a section of fence more efficiently, and she helped him lift heavy supplies with strength and precision that impressed him. She, in turn, taught him to identify certain herbs and plants, explaining how they could be used for food or minor medicinal purposes. Through these shared tasks, a deeper connection grew. Their conversations were no longer limited to survival or cautious words. They began to share small stories, fragments of their lives before meeting. Thomas spoke of his childhood on the plains, the lessons he had learned from tending the land, and the quiet contentment he had once found in his solitary life. Aeon, cautiously at first, spoke of memories from her own past, moments of beauty and hardship, of family she had lost, and lessons she had learned while surviving alone. Each story brought them closer. The fear that had once defined their relationship faded, replaced by something stronger: trust, respect, and a growing sense of companionship. They began to anticipate each other's movements, understanding each other without words. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas and Aeon sat together by the stream. The water reflected the fiery colors of the sky, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Thomas watched her quietly, noticing the subtle changes in her expression, the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the faint smile that appeared without thought. "You've come a long way since the first day I saw you here," he said softly. "You trust this place now and maybe even me." Aeon looked at him, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her gaze. "I do," she admitted quietly. "I didn't think I could, but you've shown me something I didn't know existed: safety, kindness, trust." Thomas smiled, a quiet warmth filling him. "I'll always do my best to protect that," he said, "for as long as you let me." They remained by the stream as the sky darkened, sharing the silence that spoke more than words could. The bond between them had shifted. It was no longer just about survival or protection. It was about respect, understanding, and the quiet beginnings of care that went deeper than either had expected. Over the next several weeks, Thomas and Aeon worked together to make the cabin and surrounding land more secure and comfortable. They repaired old fences, tended the animals, and built small shelters for livestock. Aeon contributed ideas and labor, often surprising Thomas with her knowledge of the land and her clever solutions to practical problems. Her skills, once honed for survival alone, now complemented his routines, making the ranch operate more smoothly than ever before. Their partnership deepened in subtle ways. They shared meals more often, sometimes sitting together in silence, sometimes talking quietly about the tasks of the day. Thomas found himself opening up in ways he never had before, and Aeon, cautiously, allowed herself to feel a sense of belonging she had never experienced. One afternoon, as they walked along the stream together, Thomas spoke gently. "Aeon, I know you've been through many hardships. I can't change the past, but I hope this place can be a new beginning for you." She looked at him, the sunlight glinting off her hair, and nodded. "It feels like one," she said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel that I can stay, that I can be safe, and that I can trust." Thomas felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He realized that he had found more than companionship. He had found someone whose presence made his world fuller, brighter, and more meaningful. The quiet rhythm of the ranch had been enriched by her courage, intelligence, and strength. As the months passed, their bond continued to grow. They worked together seamlessly, their actions reflecting the mutual respect and understanding that had formed between them. Thomas admired Aeon not only for her beauty but for her resilience, intelligence, and kindness. Aeon, in turn, appreciated Thomas's patience, honesty, and unwavering support. The small moments became significant: a shared meal, a laugh at a minor mishap with the animals, a quiet walk by the stream. Each instance strengthened the foundation of their connection, building a trust that would endure the challenges of the world outside the ranch. One day, Aeon paused while walking through the field, looking back at the cabin and the land they had been working to care for together. She turned to Thomas and spoke quietly, almost as if to herself. "I never imagined I could feel at home again," she said. "But now I think I can." Thomas smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are home here," he said, "and you are always welcome. This is more than a place, it's a life we can build together." Aeon's eyes softened, reflecting the trust and gratitude she felt. She realized that she had found safety, companionship, and the beginning of a life that was no longer dictated by fear. The bond between them had grown from cautious trust into something deeper, a connection built on shared experiences, respect, and quiet understanding. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the cabin, sometimes speaking, sometimes enjoying the silence. The gentle crackle of the fire, the distant sounds of animals settling for the night, and the soft whisper of wind through the trees created a sense of peace neither had felt in years. Here in the quiet of the ranch, they could simply be themselves, safe, understood, and respected. As time went on, Thomas and Aeon began to plan for the future. They talked quietly about ways to make the ranch more secure, how to improve their living spaces, and how to ensure that they could continue to live safely on the land. Each plan, each task, reflected not just practical concerns but a shared vision of life together. The realization of their growing bond was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, it was in the quiet moments, helping each other with daily chores, sharing small smiles, and looking out for one another without being asked. Trust and respect had grown into a partnership, one that was steady, strong, and enduring. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Thomas and Aeon stood together by the stream, watching the water flow gently over the rocks. The colors of the sunset reflected in their eyes, painting the world in shades of gold and pink. Thomas looked at Aeon, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before. "You've changed my life," he said softly. "Not just because you've trusted me, but because you've shown me how to care, how to hope, and how to see the world differently." Aeon smiled, a quiet, contented smile. "And you've changed mine," she replied. "You've shown me that there can be safety, kindness, and trust. That life doesn't have to be about running or hiding, that it can be about living." In that moment, they both understood that their lives were no longer separate. They had faced challenges together, built trust through patience and courage, and discovered the beginnings of something rare and meaningful. Their bond was more than survival, it was hope, respect, and the quiet joy of companionship. As the last light of the sun faded behind the hills, Thomas and Aeon turned toward the cabin, ready to face each new day together. They had survived fear, found trust, and discovered the possibility of a new life, one where safety, understanding, and mutual respect created a foundation for the future. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to a place where they could finally be at peace, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges might come together.